Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of a new day begun. Let us march on till victory is won. Good afternoon and welcome everyone to Freedom Church of the Poor. We are in our second service of our third year of our Black August commemoration during the Freedom Church of the Poor season of Jubilee. We are once again joined by our partners with the SSING Network, Highlander Center, the Black Joy Experience with Black Youth Project 100, and New Disabled South. And to get us started this afternoon, we'll open up as always with our mission statement. The Freedom Church of the Poor is a spiritual and political home for movement leaders. We believe in the fundamental dignity and value of all life and in a world of abundance where all can thrive. We gather as a community of faith to support and care for each other. We commit to realizing the abundant world God promises by identifying, developing, and uniting leaders who will build a movement to end poverty led by the poor. In this community and through our commitments to this struggle, we seek to rediscover and share a vision and practice of religion that is rooted in truth, justice, and in love. And then Shun will read our mission statement for Black August. Our season statement, sorry.
Black August is a tradition that originated in California's prisons in the 1970s after the deaths of Jonathan and George Jackson and other incarcerated Black people who sought freedom. We take time in August to lift up past and current organizations and revolutionaries who are in a battle with, incarcerated, and or assassinated by the U.S. state apparatus. It is also indeed a time for us to prepare for what lies ahead by building and deepening relationships, drawing on this rich history of our movement to develop our leaders for future struggle, to share song and music and art, and to be in spiritual community.
Thank you so much, Shun, and thank you, Adam, for sharing the screen. Thank you again for joining us this evening. You could be, and definitely are, anywhere in the world right now, and we appreciate you for taking this time to commune with the Freedom Church of the Poor. Yesterday marked 11 years since Michael Brown's death. In the cruel August heat in the neighborhood of Ferguson, Missouri, his body was left in the uncompromising street by law enforcement officers for 4.5 hours after they murdered him. Although I can't entirely remember where I was at the time, I do remember my actions that day. I was somewhere in Miami, glued to my phone on Twitter, both trying to figure out what was happening on the ground in Ferguson while directing other people in other places on how to possibly respond. I barely slept. Not only had the uprising sparked to a level that I had never witnessed before in my life, Twitter finally allowed for the trending of a name of someone killed by police violence, which connected outrage from corners of society to come together in ways that we had never before. Dr. Robin D.G. Kelly has pointed out before that the ability to have Michael Brown's name trend on Twitter was actually as a way for the state to take us away from us having witnessed the devastation and bombing of Gaza at that time, because never before Mike Brown had someone who had been killed by the police was their name allowed to trend. But instead of confusing and dividing our attention, many of us began to see the parallel of violence in Palestine under the occupation of US-backed Israel, and the violence that we were witnessing in our own towns and cities across this nation, of people being brutalized directly and indirectly by the US state. And tomorrow will mark 60 years since the uprising in Watts, California, that was sparked by a similar stop by law enforcement. And although it did not kill the young teenagers who had been harassed by the police, it seeded a movement of flowering possibility with those who were discontented by the compromises and slow victories that had not yet spread of the civil rights movement. I was reading this afternoon, I've shared with many of you all, I've been reading Black Liturgies by Cole Arthur Riley. And for today, I was torn between picking up the chapter of rage or of lament. And I say this because a friend of mine once pointed out, I was telling them how I had all my life had to deal with feelings of anger, intense body wrecking anger, that sometimes I didn't know what to do with it. And a friend of mine a few years ago suggested that maybe it wasn't so much anger and rage I was feeling all the time, but of sadness and a deep despair that I wasn't comfortable with dealing with. And who could be? We don't live in a society that allows for sadness. But rage, anger is an emotion, perhaps because it's more masculine or aggressive emotion that is more widely accepted in our society. And because of that conversation, instead of going to the chapter on rage, I actually went to the chapter of lament today. And it started out with this quote by Jamaica Kincaid. "You cry when you're born because your lungs expand. You breathe. I think that's really kind of significant. You come into the world crying, and it's a sign that you're alive." During the movement for Black Lives convening in commemoration of the movement a few weeks ago, we were able to spend time with loved ones of those who had been slain by the state, whether directly or indirectly. And throughout conversations, and there was a huge panel with folks whose loved ones who had been taken by police, they kept saying this African proverb over and over, woven throughout their comments, that there are two deaths. One death that happens when your body passes away, and the other that occurs when people stop saying your name. And so many of the family members had two requests leaving that space. Of course, the first was to continue struggling and fighting for justice, not that just of those who are taken, but also those who are still here and those who are yet to become. And they asked us to never stop saying the names of their loved ones. At that same convening, I was able to have a conversation with Mama Gwen Carr, who is the mother of Eric Garner. And although Mama Carr and I have met many times before, I was able to actually have a real one-on-one intimate conversation with her. And I know I've shared this before on Freedom Church of the Poor, that Eric Garner's death to me was life-changing in so many ways. Whether you call it a political or spiritual awakening or a mental breakdown, it was life-changing. And I was down bad. I remember being in the bed for weeks after his murder. And there was something about the way that Mama Carr and Eric Garner's daughter at the time, Erica Garner, continue to put themselves out there in the streets, calling for justice for not only Eric Garner, but for all those whose life were taken. It inspired me to the core. And I carry Erica Garner's name in my prayers because she ultimately died of a broken heart at the tender age of 35 years old by heart attack. I want to lift up the names of Erica and the names of all the women, known and unknown, whose hearts have yet to mend. To pray for all the little girls whose girlhood is taken, mistaken, and denied. Mothers of the slain, Zippa, Mamie Till, Leslie McSpaden. Mothers of the Revolution, Mary, Mother of Jesus, Marsha P. Johnson, Erica Garner. Our sisters in the wilderness, and not just sisters, of dissent, of lament, wailing for justice, struggling for a new world to begin. Femmes in the margins, stretching and growing us to come together. We say the names of those who we know and honor the memories of those we don't through our works. And with that, Moses and I would like to share and lead us in a litany for this service. And Adam, if you could share the slides in the chat. On each slide, there's pictures of women who have come before us in the movement. And so while we're going through this litany, we ask that if there are names that speak to you, whether you know them or you don't know them, that you put them in the chat, and we shared the names of the folks. So I'll read the call and Moses will read the response, and you can read it with us on mute. This season, we remember the revolutionaries who came before us, those who stumbled, resisted, and persevered in the struggle for liberation.
We look back to move forward. We find strength in their witness and hope in their struggle.
Black August is a sacred time, born in prison, born in resistance, seeking freedom and seeking justice. It is a season of reflection, mourning, and action.
We honor the names, known and unknown, of those who dared to dream of freedom, and we honor the stories, known and unknown, of communities who fought for liberation.
In Freedom Church of the Poor, we believe in a God who hears our cries for justice in the depths of war, prisons, pain, solitude, and hunger. We believe in a God that sides with the oppressed, forsaking the rich and powerful king and leaders while thirsting for our freedom alongside us. Our God breaks the chains of oppression and brutality, proclaiming abundance and liberation for all.
We follow Moses, who led his people to freedom. We follow Jesus, who came to set the captives free. We follow the communion of saints, Harriet, Marcia, Fanny, and more, who have shown us God's truth and light through their struggle.
We remember freedom is not just for heaven. Freedom is not a hypothetical hope or want. It is the reign of God, which commands justice, peace, and abundance here and now.
We are not bystanders. We are co-creators with God in building a new world.
Assata Shakur said, "It is our duty to fight for our freedom. It is our duty to win."
We must love each other and protect each other. We commit to the struggle. We commit to each other.
We will confront the lies of empire and reclaim the gospel of liberation. We will cry out for justice as we fight for our liberation and for the liberation of all. We have nothing to lose but our chains.
Let Black August be our altar. Let struggle be our liturgy.
Let justice roll through us as song sings, like the blood on our bones and like rivers over stone. Let the Spirit move freely and the lessons of this history guide us until all people are free. Amen, Ashe, and onward.
Onward.
Thank you. And so we'd like to share a song, Breaths by Sweet Honey and the Rock, as shared by Nora Berry during Black August last year.
Bum bum, ba-dum ba-dee-ah-dum, ba-dum da-dee-ah-dum. Listen more often to things than to beings. Listen more often to things than to beings. 'Tis the ancestors' breath when the fire's voice is heard. 'Tis the ancestors' breath in the voice of the waters. Those who have died have never, never left. The dead are not under the earth. They are in the groaning woods. They are in the moaning rocks. They are in the crying grass. They are in the groaning woods. The dead are not under the earth. Listen more often to things than to beings. Listen more often to things than to beings. 'Tis the ancestors' breath when the fire's voice is heard. 'Tis the ancestors' breath in the voice of the waters. Those who have died have never, never left. The dead have a pact with the living. They are in the woman's breast. They are in the wailing child. They are with us in our homes. They are with us in this crowd. The dead have a pact with the living. So listen more often to things than to beings. Listen more often to things than to beings. 'Tis the ancestors' breath when the fire's voice is heard. 'Tis the ancestors' breath in the voice of the waters.
That song always makes me smile. Next, we're going to read our sacred text for this evening, and we'll have Minister Moses read it for us. And Minister Adam will share. Yeah.
So today's sacred text is 2 Samuel chapter 21, verses 1 through 14. Now there was a famine in the days of David for 3 years, year after year, and David inquired of the Lord. The Lord said, "There is blood guilt on Saul and on his house because he put the Gibeonites to death." So the king called the Gibeonites and spoke to them. Now the Gibeonites were not part of Israel, but of the remnant of the Amorites. Although the people of Israel had sworn to spare them, Saul had tried to wipe them out in his zeal for the people of Israel and Judah. David said to the Gibeonites, "What shall I do for you? How shall I make expiation that you may bless the heritage of the Lord?" The Gibeonites said to him, "It is not a matter of silver or gold between us and Saul or his house. Neither is it for us to put anyone to death in Israel." He said, What do you say that I should do for you?" They said to the king, The man who consumed us and planned to destroy us so that we should have no place in all the territory of Israel, let 7 of his sons be handed over to us, and we will impale them before the Lord at Gibeon on the mountain of the Lord. The king said, I will hand them over. But the king spared Mephibosheth, the son of Saul's son Jonathan, because of the oath of the Lord that was between them, between David and Jonathan, son of Saul. The king took the 2 sons of Rizpah, daughter of Aiah, whom she bore to Saul, Armoni and Mephibosheth, and the 5 sons of Merab, daughter of Saul, whom she bore to Adriel, the son of Barzillai the Methohalite. He gave them into the hands of the Gibeonites, and they impaled them on the mountain before the Lord. The 7 of them perished together. They were put to death on the first days of the harvest, at the beginning of barley harvest. Then Rizpah and the daughter of Aiah took sackcloth and spread it on a rock for herself, from beginning of the harvest until rain fell on them from the heavens. She did not allow the birds of the air to come on the bodies by day or wild animals by night. When David was told what Rizpah, daughter of Aiah, the concubine of Saul, had done, David went out and took the bones of Saul and the bones of his son Jonathan from the people of Jabesh Gilead, who had stolen them for the public square of Bethshan, where the Philistines had hung them up on the day the Philistines killed Saul of Gilboa. He brought up from there the bones of Saul and the bones of his son Jonathan, and they gathered the bones of those who had been impaled. They buried the bones of Saul and of his own son Jonathan in the land of Benjamin and Zelah, in the tomb of his father Kish. They did all that the king commanded. After that, God heeded supplications for the land. The word of the Lord.
Thank you so much for reading, Minister Moses. I'm now going to turn it to, oh my gosh, one of my faves, organizer, professor, and theologian, Reverend Naomi Washington Leapheart. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Ciara, and everybody. I'm glad to be here tonight with you for this time together, this balm in Gilead, this oasis, this refuge in the time of deep crisis and struggle. I was poking around on the official Women's History Month website, which is maintained by the Library of Congress and the Smithsonian. And, you know, who knows whether the website will look the same tomorrow as it does today, but nevertheless, there is a collection on the website of photographs from the National Woman's Party. This party, founded in 1916, attracted publicity, organized protests, and put pressure on government officials in order to get Congress to pass an amendment that guaranteed women the right to vote. Now, there are almost 500 pictures in this collection of photographs. There are no Black women in any of the photos, not one. How can you create a Women of Protest, which is what it's called, photo collection, and exclude Black women? Well, we know how. We know that before the 19th Amendment was actually passed, Sojourner Truth, one of the ancestors we lifted up just moments ago, was asking the question, ain't I a woman? Pushing back against the white women whose fight for voting rights didn't include Black women. And we know that 40 years after the 19th Amendment was passed, Mother Fannie Lou Hamer, whose name we have also invoked today, was declaring that she had been tired for so long and she was sick and tired of being sick and tired. President Lyndon Johnson was afraid of the power of Fannie Lou's live testimony before the Democratic National Convention in the summer of 1964, so scared of her truth-telling that he called an emergency press conference at the White House to divert media coverage away from Mother Hamer's remarks. Just like Fannie Lou and Sojourner's names, probably don't get called when this country is reflecting about the contributions of women. The name of the woman mentioned in the biblical passage that was just read is probably not familiar to most. It wasn't familiar to me for a long time. But her witness here in these verses in 2 Samuel ought to encourage us to fight on, because we are standing on the shoulders of women freedom fighters like Rispa. Say her name, whisper her name to yourself, Rispa. Now, in order to understand Rispa's story, you got to go back to the book of Joshua. The book of Joshua, we read that the children of biblical Israel were moving into the land of Canaan. They had escaped the bondage of Egyptian slavery. They'd wandered for 40 years in the wilderness, murmuring and complaining and longing for the familiar security of enslavement. Moses dies. And Joshua helps the people break the curse of internalized oppression so they can make this pilgrim into the so-called promised land. But we know that the promised land was not vacant. In order for the Israelites to settle in Canaan, they had to drive out the nations already occupying the land. So Israel put together a great army, and with Joshua as their leader, they took over. And the text records them winning battle after battle. And if they lost a fight, they prayed, went back, and won the rematch. The text says, at the vibrations of their marching feet and their loud trumpets, even the walls of Jericho, indestructible, came tumbling down. So word on the street was that surely the hand of God was upon the Israelites, because all they did was win. The nation of Gibeon, mentioned in today's text, knew that Israel was getting close. They knew they were next on the list, and they didn't have a mighty army like the Israelites. They didn't have fortress walls like Jericho. Rather than face a mass genocide, rather than face utter humiliation, they decided to throw up the flag of surrender. They decided to turn down the invitation to war. And so, because they surrendered, Joshua made a covenant with the Gibeonites. He said, "We will never destroy you." This covenant lasted for generations until Saul, good old Saul, became the king of biblical Israel. And Saul was no diplomat. His first concern was enlarging his territory, securing his empire. That sounds familiar to me. Does it sound familiar to you? In his zeal for conquest, Saul gave the order, destroy the Gibeonites. Saul broke the covenant that Joshua had made to that nation. He attacked and killed them to steal their land and amass power. Saul's ego trip and violence jeopardized biblical Israel's political relationships, and Saul died before he could make amends for the mess he had made. And now here we are in 2 Samuel. We see that Israel has been in a famine for 3 years, and King David is trying to figure out why. He prays, and God says, well, the famine is due to Saul's bloodthirsty ways. Saul violated the promise, and now his nation is suffering. Now, we know David. David is no stranger to political wheeling and dealing, so he comes up with a plan. He goes to the Gibeonites and he says, I want to make amends for what Saul did. The Gibeonites, they reject any offer of Saul's silver or gold. I'm sure they said, how dare you offer us remnants of our murderer's possessions? How dare you pass his legacy down to us? And the Gibeonites, they also reject any eye for eye offer. You kill some Israelites to make up for the death of our folk. No. But eventually they do agree on this arrangement. The Gibeonites ask David to kill 7 of Saul's sons. So David agrees to this plan. David chooses 5 of Saul's grandsons and 2 of Saul's sons. And the 2 sons, they were Rizpah's boys. The 7 men were hanged, left on the mountainside in view of everyone. Reminds me of Mike Brown's body lying on Canfield Drive for more than 4 hours 11 years ago. It was the custom to bury those who were killed in this way after one day. But David left those bodies there to rot, to decompose in the hot sun. And Rizpah, this mama, had had enough. Like Fannie Lou, like Sojourner, she had been tired for too long. Now, she didn't have much political agency. She was one of Saul's many wives, probably dismissed and discarded on a regular basis. But now here she was, left to fend for herself after her sons were killed. She was denied the right to protect her boys, to bury her boys with respect and love. Rizpah was sick and tired of being sick and tired. Her sons and the sons of other mothers were the surrogates in the atonement game that David played with the Gibeonites. Her sons and the sons of other mothers were pawns in their politicking. They were killed to pay somebody else's debt. They were killed because they had the wrong ancestral lineage. They were killed because they reminded David and the Gibeonite people of the legacy of Saul's oppressive regime. Killed because they threatened the government's success. Does this sound familiar to anybody? Killed to pay a debt to an old enemy. Killed. God had told David that the famine was due to broken promises and bloodthirst. And David responds, instead of confessing his sins, instead of repenting of Saul's sins, instead of seeking to rule and reign in a different way without violence, without broken promises, David decides that the lives of these 7 men are disposable. But Rizpah had had enough. Rizpah may have not had much in terms of social status, but she did have the power of a rebellious faith. Rizpah didn't have a law degree to fight the killing of her sons in court, but she did have a sackcloth and some ashes to make her grieving case in the court of public opinion. She had the tool of public grief. She refused to accept what had happened to her sons and these other mothers' sons. So she stayed in mourning. There was no moving on from this. She didn't have firearms or ammunition, but she had the tree branches around the mountain available to beat back the animals that wanted to devour their precious bodies. She had this tool of public protest. She wasn't going to let anything get in the way of her witness and her testimony. She didn't have a crowd of followers on social media, and she didn't make the rounds on the news station so she could tell her story, but she sat by herself for 5 months, y'all. From harvest season to the rainy season, praying and fasting and drawing attention to the assassination of her sons and those other mothers' sons. She had the tool of persistence in public. Nobody came to relieve her, give her a break from her shift so she could go get something to eat. Nobody brought her covered dishes to help her keep from starving, but she would not leave until she got what she came for, until David took responsibility until her sons and the sons of those other mothers were buried with dignity and respect. Rebellious faith. She wouldn't let the 7 be forgotten. This was the first Say Their Name campaign. She risked herself for other mothers' sons. She sat there. She is the ancient ancestor to the mothers of the movement. And so David really had no choice. Government has to tremble and fall under the weight of righteous truth. That's the good news. Rizpah's protest, Rizpah's grief, Rizpah's persistence drove the king to take those 7 bodies down from the mountain and bury them properly. We are mobilizing. We are organizing, we are lamenting as Freedom Church of the Poor, as dissident disciples of God enfleshed, because we are witnessing and have for a long time witnessed bloodthirsty regimes in living technicolor. We see our own nation pledging itself to an unholy marriage of convenience and profits and power with the government of the modern day state of Israel, subsidizing the very disposal of human beings made by God's hand and in God's image. We see the United States politicians making deals that are going to cost our most vulnerable folk everything and eventually cost everybody everything. We see them just the other day, right before hurricane season begins, holding disaster aid hostage unless cities and towns and states pledge their loyalty to Israel. Cruelty is the point. The text seemed to suggest that because David relented, that's how the famine ended. But I want to take a womanist reading of this passage. God restored the land and brought the rain to end the famine because Rizpah had kept vigil over those bodies for 5 long months. It wasn't an act of Congress. It wasn't an executive order. It was a grieving mother who had the nerve to embarrass the state, to shame the state into doing right by her boys. And it was her rebellion, Rizpah's rebellion, that brought God's intervention, yielding the clouds to rain. So I just want to know tonight, do you have Rizpah's rebellious faith? Will you sit in public lamentation until justice is served? When we do, these unjust leaders will tremble where they stand, and they will have no choice but to respond. They may try to ignore us like David did for 5 long months. They may try to silence us like Lyndon B. Johnson tried to preempt and cut off Fannie Lou Hamer. But ultimately, God's justice will prevail. We will be vindicated for telling the truth and shaming the devil. So is there anybody here who has a Rizpah spirit today? Anybody who refuses to live into the kind of piety, the kind of faith, the kind of holiness that requires some people to die so that others can live? Do you have the Rizpah spirit to refuse to shut up, to refuse to go away until we get what we demand? Until Black people everywhere are fully and finally free. Until Palestine is fully and finally free. Is there one willing to start a Rizpah rebellion today? Thanks be to God. Amen.
Woo! Thanks be to God. May we all have Rizpah's rebellious faith. Wow. Thank you so much, Reverend Naomi. Y'all, I just saw Reverend Naomi. My Black August invitations have been in the mail on CP time. And I just saw Reverend Naomi just like a week ago. And, I didn't want to, I just want to say, hi, what's going on? And then eventually be like, look out for email. Reverend Naomi said, what's going on with Freedom Church of the Poor? And I was like, well, thank you. Thank you so much. It just means the world to have you on with us and just giving so much of yourself. And whoo, yes. All right. Yes. All right. We're cooking. All right. Let me pass it on to another sister, Shun Tucker Allen of New Disabled South, my Agnes Scotty, Decatur where it's greater, for some of us. Thank you so much, Shun, for being a part of the Black August planning team and for sharing this evening.
Listen. I mean, I let the good Reverend know that she had me at the Womanist t-shirt. But there is indeed a bomb in the Freedom Church of the Poor today. And we thank God for using Reverend Naomi. We thank you for your words. We indeed have a little bit of that Rispa spirit. So thank you deeply, sister, for more than you know. It is absolutely a privilege to be in community with Freedom Church of the Poor every time I'm here. It's more than a privilege today. My soul is moved. Let me just say real quick, okay, for those of us from the deep South, we know most of my work has been in Black church. So I'm going to say today, we just had church, okay? And y'all know what that is. But let me just tell you, church don't always move like that. So you hold those moments. But my sister, my goodness, you let God use you today. And we are truly grateful for that. So as I prepare for today, certainly, again, always honored to be here in this space with you all. I sat real deeply with what I wanted to offer. And similar to my good sister, Ciara, I think that I found myself kind of going from anger to lament and just not really sure how to bring it all out. So I don't think I have the pleasure of being long-winded today, but I think I just wanted to, from the best of me, articulate what I'm feeling, what those of us that do this work may be feeling, because I think sometimes that's a whole different perspective that we got to get ourselves together so we can be together to help somebody else be together. And it's a lot in this season. I'm sure many of y'all feel the same way. There are a lot of people hurting. There are people lost. Religion is being used as a weapon. The good Reverend mentioned so much of what we know is coming down the pipe. We acknowledge so much is already here. So many people just trying to survive. And we are fighting through despair to make sense of the constant chaos every single day. But we're also trying to hold on to our faith. And so I think a lot about our ancestors and what they may have felt, but also how their faith probably wavered at times, because I'm sure things were just as overwhelming for them, but yet they found a way to keep going. So I have the privilege of serving at New Disabled South, and we are an organization dedicated to improving the lives of disabled people throughout the South. We are, for the most part, a fully disabled team with disabilities that are both visible and invisible, and deeply feel that this anchors our work because we understand personally how urgent this work is. And we understand it because the numbers tell us. The numbers tell us that disabled people are twice as likely to live in poverty, and that the South has the highest poverty rates in the United States. We know that 2/3 of people in state and federal prisons are disabled. We also know that half of the people killed by police are disabled. And we know for Black people, Black disabled people in particular, that this is even more urgent. We know that 55% of disabled Black men are likely to be arrested by the age of 28. 55%. 25% of disabled Black men are likely to be arrested by the age of 28. And so, like many of you, I carry a deep sense of urgency, which I am sure mirrors that of our ancestors. And again, I'm deeply, deeply grateful to Ciara and Freedom Church of the Poor for bringing us together in this month of Black August, creating a space. Because for me, it's not just a space about reflection. It is a space about recommitting to this work. And this month reminds us that the work that we do is sacred. And even as it evolves, through the small wins, the hard-fought progress, we understand that this work still continues because the struggle is ongoing. And it can never truly end until all of us are liberated. The word urgency is defined as something critical, something that demands immediate action. And some say that, like the ancestors, like all of the stuff that Reverend Naomi brought up, that we are living at this moment, we are in a constant state of urgency. And today, as a Black woman working in the space of disability justice, I think of the urgency that Brad Lomax must have possessed. Diagnosed with multiple sclerosis as a teenager, Brad Lomax helped to found the Black Panther Party chapter in Washington, D.C., and later organized the first African Liberation Day demonstration in Oakland. Living with a disability and a revolutionary spirit, Mr. Lomax became a key voice in the intersection of Black liberation and disability justice. In fact, he challenged the Center for Independent Living for centering white disabled men in Berkeley while ignoring Black disabled communities in Oakland. And with the support of the Black Panthers, he established an Oakland satellite office. And that office primarily served Black disabled Oakland citizens directly. In fact, he is also credited with raising the awareness of disability rights within the Black Panther Party. And he later joined in on the historic sit-ins for the push for Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act. Brad Lomax was a revolutionary. May we forever, forever speak his name. I also thought of Fannie Lou Hamer, who we've heard a lot about this sister today. A Black woman forcibly sterilized and later disabled at the hands of the state of Mississippi. And Sister Fannie's urgency was clear, an urgency to demand voting rights, an urgency to challenge a political party that shut Black people out, an urgency to also fight for economic justice. And in addition to her activism, and despite the attempt to render her motherless, Mrs. Hamer and her husband Pap adopted and raised able-bodied and disabled children. She was also a woman of deep faith, and she questioned that faith. She was also quoted as saying, "When I liberate myself, I liberate others." Fannie Lou Hamer was the embodiment of faith in action. And she once told a crowd at a Baptist school meeting, "All we have to do is trust God and launch out into the deep. You can pray until you faint, but if you don't get up and try to do something, God is not going to put it in your lap." Fannie Lou Hamer was a revolutionary. May we forever speak her name. And now here we are. Many of us doing this work year after year, heartbreak after heartbreak, giving it every single thing we have, knowing that we will likely be nameless and faceless in the history books, but we are still standard bearers of justice. So I say today for me that Black August is not about looking back. It is about a recommitment to liberation. It is Sankofa. It is reaching back to reclaim so we can move forward in power. It is turning towards the future and laying the seeds and cultivating the soil of all of those that have come after us because somebody poured into us. And that this is not new work. This is the continuation of our ancestors' struggle. It is the evolution of liberation. It is the work of sacrifice. It is the work of being sick and tired of being sick and tired. It is the work of liberation. It is the work of love. It is the work of Jesus. Amen and Ashe.
Amen and Ashe. Thank you so much, Shun, for lifting up Sister Fannie Lou Hamer and dear brother Brad Lomax. I did not know that, that history, and it's incredible. May we move in their spirit. Yes, I felt a shock too. I definitely, oh man, thank you so much. I'd next like to have us be joined by our dear OG, Louis Rodriguez. Louis is a poet laureate of Los Angeles, California, and co-founder of the Tia Chucha's Central Cultural and Bookstore. And thank you so much, Louis, for joining us. It means a lot. I learned so much from you over the years, and I'm just so grateful to be able to share you with the Freedom Church community this afternoon.
Well, thank you. This has been wonderful and inspirational. And I want to first bring up the voice of Wanda Coleman, the great Watts poet, the best voice of Watts, who passed but was my good friend. And I just want to bring her up because she stood for what Watts was. People may not know, I grew up in Watts. As a kid, I left when I was about 8 or 9 years old, but I returned in my early 20s. My oldest kids were born there. And I worked in industry there. And I have to say, my talk is really about not just the Black liberation struggle, which was at the heart of what Watts was, but also the class struggle. This was a working class community. And people need to know that because they don't understand. When you go outside of LA, people don't get what Watts was. Watts was a working class community. There was a lot of industry in LA. It was the largest, and I think still is, but it went down completely like other places, the largest manufacturing center of the country, which is why Black people came there, especially in the beginning of World War II, because the Liberty ships that were being built in the shipyards there made it the largest shipyards in the country, brought a lot of other industry. And then eventually the auto industry, because it became the auto capital of the world, not auto industry like Detroit, but I'm talking about cars. They got rid of all the subways, built all these freeways. So they had GM plants, they had Ford plants, they had rubber tire companies, they had everything you needed for the auto industry. And there was garment and there was canneries. I know because I lived there and worked there, and I watched all that industry. Why it's important to bring out the class nature for Watts is because I think people don't know, may not know, that Watts was actually a Black and brown community. It always was. It was large Mexicans had lived there with Black people, and they were working in the same low end of the industry. This is important because when I grew up there, my neighbors were Mexican and Black. We were all neighbors. We understood each other. It wasn't a situation where there was a lot of animosity, as some people would think. A lot of Black families learned Spanish because Mexicans were there, and Mexicans picked up the urban Black culture as part of their culture. This is why people say, how come Mexicans like soul music so much and the oldies and all this stuff? Because they grew up among Black people. The Black and brown communities in LA were generally together. Pasadena had a Black and brown community. Pacoima was Black and brown. The west side of San Bernardino was Black and brown. In other words, every major community that had Black people, there was Mexicans right there. So that's an important part of it because the Mexicans can't get kind of forgotten, but they were an important part. Now, during the Watts Rebellion, I don't have to tell you that there was so much discrimination, so much policing against, but it was Black and brown that they were going after. They were going after both. There was even after the Pachucos during the World War II, they brought in so many Mexicans that they created a special Chicano tank just for the Mexicans. They were arresting Pachucos and Mexicans even who weren't Pachucos. Even though there was 360,000 of them that went to World War II and fought, they were still treating them as if they were less. And so the Mexicans overwhelmed the prison system. And then, of course, the number of Blacks were much more overwhelming because the number of Blacks overall in the state was not the same numbers. So the prison system ended up being majority Black and brown. up to 80% of the prison system in California, which is the largest prison system, I think, in the country. I think maybe Texas now surpassed it. But it was close to 80% were Black and brown. This made a significant shift in politics in the prison system. And I mention all this because, again, in Watts, that's what we were. When the Watts Rebellion happened, the police did two things. One, of course, they went all out to attack the Black community, all out. National Guard, they killed 34 people. They, there was so much hurting in the communities. The police role and the National Guard played a terrible role in the destruction of the community, also the people rebellion. But the other side of it is they cordoned off the Mexican community. They actually cordoned it off so they would not participate. They say there was 35,000 people involved in the Watts Rebellion, but there were 70,000 that were in agreement with what was going on, but couldn't participate. Many of them were the Mexicans that they cordoned off. If you read the book Rivers of Blood, Years of Darkness, he points out that Robert Canat, the author, points out that the few Mexicans that got killed, I think there was 2 or 3 of them, were the ones trying to break through the barriers so they can participate in the Watts Rebellion. People didn't know that story. The other side of the story, though, is the white working class. The white working class were actually across the Alameda tracks. They were in communities called Southgate, Huntington Park, Linwood. They had a big, giant General Motors plant in Southgate, huge. They were in those communities. What they did with the white community is tell them, arm yourselves, the Blacks are going to come kill you. So you can see what they were doing is dividing the class in the middle of a class battle. You understand what I'm saying? Keeping Mexicans out and keeping the white working class armed to be against the Blacks that were supposed to be doing the terrible thing of rebellion. The nature of racism in California, it's hard for people to know, but it was as bad as you can imagine. Chicago has the same history. I know I lived in Chicago 15 years, and I know how that is. They had restrictive covenants where you could not buy any house you want. That's why Mexicans and Blacks live together, because you can only live among Blacks and Mexicans. You couldn't live in other parts. Restrictive covenants was supposedly outlawed in 1948, but then in 1963, 2 years before the Watts Rebellion, they overthrew that law and put out a racist law in which they could discriminate again. That was declared unconstitutional by the Supreme Court. But in the meantime, people were again pushed into the worst neighborhoods. And then the policing was done in such a way that they were just concentrated in the Black and brown communities. I think this is an important part of the story because the Watts Rebellion affected me that way growing up there. It affected my community. I saw what was happening. It also helped revolutionize me. The Watts Rebellion was I was 11 years old. It was the single most impactful thing that I saw because it was my neighborhood. It was my people. And I was a young man and I could see what was going on. And then 2 years later, because now by then I had moved in the East Side, the East LA area, which was most all Mexican, even though there was pockets of Black people there too. I took part in the 1968 East LA walkouts of students, the largest walkout of students in the history of the country for high school, middle school kids at the time. 2 years later, I took part in the Chicano moratorium against the Vietnam War, which was the largest protest of anti-war protests in a community of color at that time. 30,000 people were there. And that also got attacked and led to a major riot that 3 people were killed and millions of dollars of damage. Same thing was going on, but not at the same level. But I took part in those things because Watts always was in my heart and my blood. I took that. And so in my early 20s, when I became a revolutionary conscious, people know my story. I was on heroin for 7 years. I was homeless for 3 years. I was in our jail, juvenile hall. I was in 2 adult facilities. I left all that to become a revolutionary. The revolutionaries, the radicals that were working in my community gave me the consciousness, and I went back to Watts. I went back to Watts where I learned more. I met some major revolutionaries, including our good friend Willie Baptist and others. I met some major people that helped me understand things, that taught me things. So Watts became my school afterwards. By the way, after the rebellion, things got worse in Watts. It didn't get better. But people did also create things. He created a whole new housing projects. He created new ways of interaction. They created youth centers. They created a lot of things. Uh, and and so Watts is always going to be in my heart, even though I don't live in Watts now. I'm there all the time. There is now a big wall, a mural across from the Watts train station, where one of the wall features the Mexican end of the story, and they have my poem, parts of my poem, Watts Bleeds, in there, to again commemorate that Watts, black and brown, rebellious, revolutionary, working class, took on the system the best it could and paid a big price, but it has become a beacon for all of us who want liberation and change. So I want to just express that that we were part of all that. I do want to say one last thing is that as far as I'm concerned, the now, as you know, LA is under attack with ICE raids. They're hitting these communities, mostly Mexican, Central American. They're really hitting them hard. Working class people. They're not going after gangsters. They're going after hardworking people. They are part of our community. They're part of the Watts community, part of East LA, part of the Northeast Valley where I'm at now. They are integral to our community. They're devastating our community by keeping them from working, arresting many of them as possible. Many of them are self-reporting. Many of them are hiding. We have to do door-by-door checks on people's houses because they're not going to grocery stores. So we try to do teams to bring them food. And I will say the Black community has stepped up like they always have for the Mexican Central American. They're there as part of the protest. They're there to take part. They're not seeing this as well. That's their battle. I'm sure there's people doing that, but for the most part, they're not seeing this is their battle. I don't have to do with it. They know we're in the same battle. We're the same class. We're fighting the same struggle. And us uplifting the Black community is endemic to all of the class, as well as us fighting as a class. So I just want to put that out there, and that's what Watts represents to me. It's in my heart, and that's why I carry it. And even though I live all over the place, I will always have Watts inside of me. It's my home. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much, Louis. I'm just so grateful to have you on. I think, for a couple of reasons. One is just that these intergenerational experiences and us being in the practice of being in conversation and learning from each other is so critical. And I've, had conversations with folks recently who are talking about some, folks who are just getting into the movement. They've never had conversations with OGs before. They don't know, like I felt, that there were people, obviously there are people who come before us in movement, but to actually be able to interact, to learn firsthand is so crucial. And I think too, like you said, Watts' class struggle, Black August is commemorating class struggle. This is a month that was born in the prisons, who are in the prisons, working class and poor people. And so Black August, if you didn't know, now you know, Black August is not just for Black folks, but for all of us to learn from struggles of Black people who have fought for liberation so that we can strengthen all of our movement and be closer together so that we can fight in unison. And
Ciara, let me just add one last point, if you don't mind.
Of course.
George Jackson met with the leader of the Mexican largest prison group there, Cyan Cadena. They were going to bring Black and brown together in the prison system. George Jackson gets killed in San Quentin. 2-3 weeks later, Cadena gets killed in Chino.
Oh, wow.
By accident. People need to know these things. They were meeting, they were interacting, they were going to stop gang violence, they were going to stop the fight between Black and brown in the prison system. They killed them both, and guess what? The violence got worse between Black and brown and other stuff. So I want to mention that we have these stories of how they try to undermine the unity of Black and brown and white workers who were able to be part of this class struggle as well.
See, thank you, Louis. I did not know that at all. I mean, George Jackson, for those, I think we said last week, was incarcerated off of a robbery charge for $71. And they tried to put that brother in jail for life. And it's because of reasons like the one that Louis pointed out, political. You cannot unite the working class. That is when you are a threat to the state and they will take you down. Jesus showed us that. Next, I want to bring dear brother, Minister Matt Rosing, to lead our prayers for the people. If you have any prayers that you would like to be included, please put them in the chat. If you're on social media, our team will check it out and lift up your prayers this week. Matt, thank you for being a part of our planning team. I've been so moved by your journey and how you've been kind of troubling this history and in our context for today.
Thank you, Ciara. Thank you, everyone, for joining. This has been an amazingly powerful service. Most of you know my story. I was incarcerated for 9 years, and I saw state violence at firsthand at its worst. And it's the fact that people can come through that struggle and learn to love and fight for each other and fight for the basic humanity of all things and in the darkest of all places is an amazing thing. So I just want to bring that idea into it, and I want to list some names of some people I know that have been killed by the state. There's Joshua Kuzman was killed by COs in front of me. I want to lift up his name. He was actually defending another inmate when it happened. There's Ricardo Munoz, who was killed by Lancaster police during a mental health crisis in front of his family. This is very painful for me, but it's very poignant to say these names because with the community of saints and lifting up our ancestors and learning from our ancestors, we need to learn that even death can't stop them. If you keep saying their names, if you keep bringing their names up, keep invoking that, that's where the power comes from. And I want to lift up prayers for the people of Gaza. The sacrifice that's in the massacres that's going on over there are just it's incomprehensible to think about that our state is taking part in this, but it's our history. We have a history of genocide against the brown and black people of this world, and we continue to push that forward as a country, and it's sickening. And our stance against it is what is needed at all times. I lift up the prayers of all the incarcerated that are locked up for no fault of their own, basically for being black and brown on, and being in this society. You have a mark on you. And I've seen it with my own eyes, and it's devastating. I lift up all the prayers for those who've been killed by the state. Their deaths are not in vain. We will learn from them. We will grow from them. We'll take power from them. And one day we will all be free. All of us, all be free. And lift up the journalist, Anas al-Sharif, killed in Israel state today, along with people from his crew. It's just, we need to, sorry, this is very emotional for me today. So I'm having a very hard time with this, but thank you for
Take your time, brother. You're doing well.
Things I've seen and things that we've all witnessed in this world, we need to rage against, and we need to fight against the dying of the light at all moments. And in that, we thank you, God, for these blessings that you give us throughout the day, the blessings you give us throughout the year, the small things that you give us, and the big things you give us. We ask for freedom for all, liberty for all, and happiness for all, because we're all of that divine human spark, all of us. We are no better than anyone else. No one else is better than us. But we are all the part of that, and we are all one. And once we can get that, we can all stand up together to the chessboard falls, and we will be one, and there will be no more tears. God will wipe away all the pain. It's promised to us. And all these I pray. Thank you. Amen.
Amen and Ashe. Thank you so much, Minister Matt. That was what we needed. Thank you. So much love to you, brother. I'm going to turn it to Minister Adam to lead us in our calls to action for this week.
Oh man, God, thank you, Ciara. Thank you all. This has been so powerful and moving. It's just amazing and beautiful group of people here, giving me a lot of hope. Try and roll through these quick. I know we're over time, but first, just want to lift up the pastoral letter of trans-affirming faith in these perilous times. If folks haven't signed on or read the letter, please do. It's a really powerful statement that came out of our season June. And Moses here tonight and Aaron Scott helped to put this together. And it's a very powerful statement that needs to be read, needs to be shared. Also, from that season, we have an amazing set of resources that Moses helped to pull together. Bible studies, prayers, liturgies, really important, vital analysis of the Bible that we're going to be sharing here shortly. So look out for that. And if you aren't already signed up for Freedom Church, please do that as well and spread the word. We can drop the link in the chat, and you can get all the information for both the Sunday service and the Wednesday Bible study by following that. Next Wednesday, we will continue Bible study at 6 p.m. So Eastern, please join. And then a couple of resources that come out from the Kairos Center. First, a book called You Only Get What You're Organized to Take, Lessons from the Movement to End Poverty. Noam Sandweiss back, Reverend Liz Theo Harris put this out, and it's contains insights and experience from many leaders in our movement. Some of them are here tonight, and it's a really vital resource for our movement. And if you haven't seen it, check it out. Also, we are pulling together some reading circles so we can read and study together. Starting in early September, you'll see more information, but we're going to have one on Thursday at 1 p.m. Eastern and one on Wednesday at 6 p.m. Eastern, which that one is going to be at the time of our Freedom Church Bible study. It will run for 8 weeks and a chance to do some group study together. So look out for the RSVP and sign up for that. And then finally, a real exciting announcement of another resource called We Pray Freedom. Rituals and Liturgies from the Freedom Church of the Poor will be released September 9th. You can pre-order it now from Broadleaf. And many of the folks that contributed to that are as well here tonight as well, and often at Freedom Church. And again, just a really powerful resource for our community to hold spiritual space and to build power together. So that is all I have, unless others want to jump in.
Thank you so much, Adam. I'll close us out with a prayer, and then maybe you could just play the video out because we're over time. So we close out this service with a prayer for those who have come before us, whose wails, chants, and songs reach us as the stars do, in distance more in time than in space, lighting the paths ahead and behind, shining a light bright enough to know where and when to follow if we listen to the voices and to the stories of the past. This week, we challenge you to do more listening than speaking. Listen to do more than hear, and may you have the ability to discern which sounds you needn't give pause to. I pray that we have the capacity to practice this with grace for others and for ourselves, knowing that we may sometimes get it wrong, sometimes we might get lost, but we will find our righted course when we discover and rediscover the ones we are meant to move alongside. We say the names of those whose visions align with justice for our people so that their spirit and wisdom may permeate through as a rich fabric to clothe and protect us from the elements, tools of resistance, persistence, Rispa's rebellious faith as a shield to be used for the protection of not only ourselves, but for others, as a trumpet, a drum, a bass, or just a hum, to find and join with others who are moving to a new rhythm, a different way of us moving in unison for liberation of us all. I also want to task you if there are folks that you recognize on the slides or that you don't recognize and you want to know more about that we shared earlier, that maybe you research one of those names this week and share their stories with a loved one. But just remember to say their names. And with that, thank you all so much again for joining us this week. Go in peace, y'all. Much love.